Huh. So, Final Fantasy VII Remake was pretty great. It took a while for it to grow on me, though. I had played the original for the first time ever about a few months before Remake came out, and thus there were a lot of moments like, Barrett should have invited me to blow up the next reactor like 3 hours ago and I'm bored. Yeah, Remake's pacing is a bit weird, but it grew on me after a bit. Midgar is a pretty fantastic setting. Final Fantasy VII is a game that revolves a lot around themes of corporate overreach and tyranny, environmentalism, eco-terrorism, and economic disparity, at least until Sephiroth and Jenova bust in and kind of hijack the plot in the original game. And Midgar's design demonstrates this. It's a city that's literally stratified by class. The richer residents live on this well-to-do upper plate, while the poor live underneath, robbing them of such luxuries as sunlight, and also not having to deal with monsters. Midgar is a symbol of wealthy, upper-class disdain for the lower classes of society. And though it was more or less done with within the first few hours of the original, it still left a huge impact on the collective consciousness of gaming culture. You can see a little bit of Midgar in everything from Deus Ex Human Revolution to that upcoming Cyberpunk game. But that's the issue. It was basically over after a few hours in the original. Like, Avalanche returns to Midgar at a later point in the original game for a few extra boss fights near the end, but once the player's out of Midgar at the beginning, they're going to spend the vast majority of the rest of the game actually exploring the rest of the continents. So how does one stretch what is basically a tutorial level to be an entire game world? Well, if we're going by Remake, not perfectly if we're being honest. Like the original's Midgar, Remake is largely a linear game, with 3 or 4 small hubs at specific points in the game that let you do side quests. This is, it's fine. It's par for the JRPG course. The problem is when the game opens up near the end, around chapter 14, and you get to fully explore the entire game world. But since the game has been pretty linear, the entire game world is just like a line. You get to explore a line. Well, maybe not a line, more like a string with beads in it, but yeah. Walking through this world is such a bore that I suspect that the Chocobos are just here to compensate for that. And because they've made entire levels and chapters out of what were essentially, like, single rooms in the original, Remake's pacing feels a lot more slow and full of fluff than the original. Like, there's this entire subplot where Aerith communes with a ghost, and then, 2 minutes later, they're like, oh yeah, the actual plot is happening, we should go and help out. But I'm being too harsh, because I ultimately think that Remake's slower pacing actually helps it out a lot. You wind up spending more time in this world and learning more about it. One of my favorite features that Remake adds is the background dialogue that you occasionally hear from other Midgar citizens. They give you more of a sense of how this world is reacting to you, and they make Midgar feel even more like a city that people live in and care about, no matter how badly it treats them. Like, there's definitely a terrorism bad undercurrent in the original Final Fantasy VII, but in Remake you see firsthand all the damage, all the people who are displaced and looking for their families, all the frightened masses who have no idea what's going on or why their home is exploding around them. It's a very effective world-building tool, and its addition makes Midgar feel less like a symbol of injustice, like it sort of was in the original game, and more like an actual lived-in city where injustice is always happening. It makes Avalanche's fight against Shinra both more justified and less so, because we are taking our time to see how both of their actions lead to actual misery and grief for Midgar's citizens. And this enhances a lot of character moments, especially on Jesse and Barrett's ends. And I wanted to cap off this video by going more in depth with Jessie. Jessie and her compatriots Biggs and Wedge were pretty much red shirts in the original game. Players didn't really get to know them much, and they died anticlimactically before they could have any real arcs. But since Remake is a longer game, and we're spending more time with these characters before their demise, we get to know about them. We meet Jessie's family, we learn her history, we learn her aspirations. We hear her lament that her bomb was more powerful than she intended, and that she regrets the loss of life and livelihood that Avalanche is causing. And yes, most importantly to the internet, she is insanely thirsty for Cloud. This makes her death at the pillar much more meaningful than it was in the original. The player doesn't just lose a red shirt here, they lose a friend, an ally, and a possible love interest if they're playing their cards spectacularly wrong. Best girl is right there, Cloud! And on that note, the entire Sector 7 collapse is a lot more harrowing in Remake than it is in the original for the same reason. I complained earlier about being bored in that area, but the truth is the collapse hurts a lot more because I spent so much time doing odd jobs and helping people out. I have much more of a stake in this area than I did when I played the original. There are frightened people here doing everything they can to survive, and watching the plate fall on them really hurts. As bored as I might have been at a lot of points in Remake, I think that its slower pace helps it a hell of a lot more than it does hinder it. You get to meet Midgar's people, explore its culture, and help comfort its citizens while Shinra and Avalanche go at it. A little boredom and side quest malarkey is a small price to pay for a world that feels much more alive. And isn't that what Final Fantasy VII has always been about at its core? Living? Being there for others in times of loss and grief and pain. So how does one stretch what is basically a tutorial level to be an entire game world? Remake's answer to that may have been imperfect, but it was also humanistic, harrowing, and ultimately beautiful.